cemeteries. They remind me of the people who've died in spite of our efforts. I'm Captain Bill Woodard. As a firefighter and an emergency rescue worker, I'm usually one of the first people to arrive at the scene of an accident. Any loss of life is tragic, but when people die because someone was driving drunk, the tragedy is especially senseless because it could have been prevented so easily. The victims of drunk drivers aren't just those who are killed or hurt in the crash. The people left in the aftermath must deal with their loss and put their lives back together somehow. 5 Oklahomans are willing to talk about how drunk driving changed their lives forever. Sharing their personal experiences is difficult, but they want their message to be heard. Drunk drivers destroy dreams.
Melody Stout had everything going for her. Tall, blonde, and good-looking, this 19-year-old college student had a promising future. On October 17, 1988, Melody drove from her home in Claremore to Tulsa's LaFortune Park to go jogging with a friend. Melody never made it back home. Her father, Alan, describes what happened to his daughter that night.
For some reason, a lot of parents worry about where their kids are. For some reason, we had not even considered that she was not home, and I guess it was around 11 o'clock, and we'd already gone to bed. And the doorbell rang, and I immediately thought, well, this is one of the girls' friends that's coming over here. It's not unusual for one of their friends to come over late at night, and I was just about halfway ticked off, and I got up and got my clothes on and went to the door and opened the door, and it was a guy that, I knew this guy, and I immediately didn't register who it was, but then I thought, that's the funeral home director, and the other guy standing there was the highway patrolman, so that was definitely a clue as that something had happened. The minister was here when I told my wife, and then after we told her, we went up and told my other daughter, who was 16 at that time. And that's kind of a scary thing to happen. I can remember that my heart was just pounding on the inside. I probably looked cool enough from the outside, but it was just unbelievable. And then when the stark reality of the situation, you hear the story and you think, well, did this really happen? But when the highway patrolman laid her driver's license down, I knew this had happened. I think Melody was on the way home at about, it was around 8:30, and she was going north in the northbound lane and had just crossed over the Verdigris River Bridge, and she was approaching the end of it when another driver was traveling south in the northbound lane and hit her head-on at the very end of the bridge. And she was killed instantly, and the driver, who was drunk in the other vehicle, was also killed. And but he had there was a lot of beer in the truck and things like that, and it was very obvious that he had been drinking. The really worst part was that her body was so mangled that we couldn't see her. And that's tough, because it's just not real unless you see them in that in a situation, so you can say goodbye. But sometimes you just don't have that luxury, I guess, of being able to say goodbye to a loved one. Along with her death goes her family and grandchildren and all the things that may go with a major portion. This is a big part of your life that's just gone, and no one will ever know how much of an impact that really was, because we never had a chance to see what she might have done, or what her future would have been, or what her family would have been like. You want to talk about her. You don't want to forget, because that's really, the memories are the only thing that you have left.
Okay, so you took the hearing aids? Okay. Okay, so you've got his hearing aids, his glasses, his watch, and his dentures in. Okay. All right.
Charla Willie is a wife, mother, and working woman living in Claremore, Oklahoma. She knows the challenges of keeping up a household, raising a son, and sharing the responsibilities of daily living with her husband, David.
Well, if we can do anything, give me a holler, okay? All right. Bye-bye, hon.
For Charla, the words challenge and daily living take on a special meaning. She has spent the last 15 years of her life in a wheelchair. A drunk driver put her there.
We hit basically head on. We traveled 187 foot after the point of impact. There wasn't much left of the car. My back was broken in 9 places. My aorta was split. My breastbone was broken. I shattered 8 teeth, broke my jaws. They didn't give me much time to live. They told my mother that I would be lucky if I made it to Tulsa. I remember waking up in the intensive care room twice, and I remember looking up once and seeing the monitors on one side and looking at the other side and seeing a big window that had like chicken wire in it. I was on what they called a striker frame. It was an old thing. It's not like the new circular beds that they have. This was, you were laying kind of like on a little stretcher, and you were laying on your back with your arms out, and you had your head was secured back to where you couldn't move your head or anything. And they would come in, they would flip you every 2 hours. People, whenever they would come in to see me and I would be on my stomach, they would crawl along the floor, and there was a little table there, and after a while they would crawl on the floor and they'd ask me, how are you today? And I'm fine. You want to read a magazine? They'd flip pages in a magazine for me. You don't think about how different being in a wheelchair is from being an able-bodied person. It's a lot different. Going to the grocery store, and you've got to try to maneuver your wheelchair and plus maneuver a grocery cart that's got maybe, in all reality, 50 pounds of groceries in it. If you've got a 10-pound bag of potatoes and a 10-pound bag of dog food, there's 20 pounds. And you've got your child in there also. You're going to add another 20, 25 pounds or whatever for your child. And you're trying to maneuver that. And there's been quite a few times where I've knocked down displays of toilet paper and paper towels, and I know I knocked down a display of razor blades one time, and it came crashing down on top of me. Just little things like that you don't think of, little things that you find that you miss, like waking up in the morning. And a lot of people will wake up in the morning and the first thing you want to do is you stretch, and I miss stretching in the morning and wiggling my toes and stretching my toes out. I know that sounds funny, but that's something that I miss.
People look at a wheelchair and they don't see the person. They see the chair, they see a handicap, and they think because somebody can't walk, they can't do anything for themselves. And it's natural.
Or write a check.
Or write a check.
Be writing a check.
Ma'am, she's got the checkbook. She writes the checks in this
and then,
family.
They'll ask you, where do you work? And or your driver's license. And I had one guy, and he said, oh, you don't work. And he goes, what about a driver's license? Oh, you can't drive. And I was sitting here going, yes, I do work. when I drive. But 9 times out of 10, they won't even ask me that. They'll ask David, you know, we want your place of appointment and your driver's license or whatever. But there's times whenever I just don't want to see it, or there's times whenever I'll come home from work and I'll sit down and I'll just push the chair away. I don't want to see it or deal with it, and it's human to feel that way.
Interstate 35 through Oklahoma City is one of the state's most heavily traveled highways. On July 21st, 1987, Samantha Schreck took this route southbound to Norman to see her boyfriend. Samantha was killed, and 4 others were severely injured in a drunk driving collision. Sam's mother, Dana, remembers the last time she saw her 19-year-old daughter alive.
She walked over to the car, and she had just taken those shoes off of her feet, and she was standing there by the car door, and she had long blonde hair. She had little freckles across her nose, and she had a really deep dark tan that summer. And she had that little white dress on that she had gotten herself, and she had those little white shoes in her hand. And there she stood at the car, and I gave her a kiss goodbye and a hug and told her I would see her a week and 2 days, because that's when I was going to get to come home. And that was it. That was the last time I ever saw her alive. In exactly a week and 2 days, right on the money, her boyfriend had called me that morning at 8 o'clock, thinking that I had already been told that Samantha had been killed by a drunk driver. But I hadn't been. He was the first one to call me. But Samantha was killed by a drunk driver. But I want you to listen to what I have to say right now, because she was the drunk driver. My beautiful 19-year-old daughter ended up killing herself and hurting 4 other people for the rest of their lives because she was real stupid drinking and driving that night. And it killed her instantly, the highway patrolman said, because I wanted to know if she had suffered. And he said what had killed her was that when the impact had hit, it had threw her forward, and she had hit the thing that came up that connects the convertible top right here. And she flew forward and it hit her, and then the impact didn't stop there. It finished up with throwing her upper half into the back seat, and the lower half was still in the front driver's seat. And that's how she died. And I wanted to go see the car. It was very hot, and the first thing you smelled was the blood. And the smell of that blood that had been sitting there for 24 hours was so strong that it almost made you want to throw up. And I looked into the back seat, and there was the blood, and that's where she died. And then I looked down into the passenger side floorboard, and I saw those 2 little white shoes that I had just bought her a week and 2 days ago. And I picked them up and I took them home. And as you go to the funeral home the next morning to pick out the coffin, you're sitting around this table and they're telling you what the prices are and how much of this funeral is and this funeral and how much coffins are. And as you're sitting there, they hand you this little bag. And this little bag contains bracelets that she had on, her senior ring that she had on, and a necklace that she had on, and this ring here, which I'll never take off. They'll bury me with this ring on. And you can still see the blood and the hair that's on this jewelry. And this is all that's left. That's all that's left of my daughter of 19 years of loving her. It's just this little bits of jewelry and memories, and that's it. And then they call you that night to tell you that she can be viewed, that you can see your daughter. And you go down there, and my other daughter, Christina, went in first. And she came back out, and she says, "Mom, you don't want to go in there." And she was dead right on that. I didn't want to go in there. I didn't even want to be there. And it took 2 men to carry me into there so I could see her. And when I first looked at her, I wanted just to shake her and just tell her to wake up, So then I could be mean to her, and just because she had hurt herself, she had destroyed her whole life and her sister's life and mine, I wanted to kill her almost because of what she had done, because she was so stupid. And then I wanted to love her and pick her up and take her home and take care of her, because I'm her mother. And she wasn't supposed to be there. And she didn't even look like Samantha. They didn't have her hair fixed right. They didn't have her makeup on right. She just didn't look like my daughter. She looked like some total stranger almost. And as I reached down to touch her, she was so cold. And you could smell the formaldehyde that was in her body. But yet that was still all I had left, was just her laying there.
Two-thirds of all deaths in alcohol-related crashes are the drunk drivers themselves. But for those who survive, the consequences of their actions will always be with them. 40-year-old Jeffrey Polk is an inmate at the Oklahoma State Reformatory in Granite. He's serving a 15-year term for second-degree murder because he killed a woman when he was driving drunk.
I went out on a Saturday night, I guess it was the 24th of June, 1989. Went to a bar that I usually go to, had some drinks and had too much to drink. I left the bar, it must have been about 6 o'clock in the morning. I remember getting in my car, pulling out of the parking lot, pulling up to a stop sign, and that's the last thing I remember. I guess I blacked out at that point. I remember the police and ambulance crew pulling me out of my car. I remember waking up at the hospital, and I remember them telling me that I'd killed someone in a head-on collision. My life won't be the same. It hasn't been the same since. Most people will think it won't happen to me. It can't happen to me. I can hold it. I can handle it. Same thing I thought. But the truth of the matter is, it can happen to anybody at any time. My advice to them is to think about me. Think about what I've said and what I am saying. Don't let this just go in one ear and out the other. I'm for real. I'm doing 15 years for murder. Life in the penitentiary is hard. It's very lonely, even though you are surrounded by people all the time, 24 hours a day. It's a very lonely place. I missed my daughter's graduation since I've been here. Missed the birth of my grandson. Got another daughter that's graduating in '92. I don't know if I'll be there for that. These are things that really bother me. It's me as a father, I need to be out there. I can't do them any good here. I've got to be out there. There's no sound. There's no sound that I know of that can compare to the sound of steel doors closing behind you. It's, you realize once those doors close, once those steel doors close behind you, that your life is entirely in somebody else's hands. You really don't have any control anymore. The worst part, the realization of knowing that through my negligence, I've taken someone's life. I've taken another life. I've deprived another family, not only my family, I've deprived another family of someone that they love very much. I know this lady, she had children, she had a husband, she had friends. I've deprived all those people. Didn't think that was going to happen. Like I said, it really hurts. It's something you'll never get over. I'll never get over. And I hope to God I can help someone else from going through the same thing I'm going through. Nobody should have to go through this. A day doesn't go by that I don't think about Mary's family. I want their forgiveness so bad I can taste it. That's what I'm afraid of. If I should run into them and they haven't forgiven me, what do I do then?
Tommy Myers was a senior at Putnam City North High School in Oklahoma City. He was a popular student and an accomplished golfer. Tommy had just been accepted to the University of Oklahoma, where he planned to go to medical school. The events of October 14, 1988 changed all that.
Sharon Myers received a phone call that night from the Baptist Medical Center. She was told that her son had been in a car wreck on the Hefner Lake Road. Sharon was relieved when she remembered that the speed limit there was only 35 miles an hour. But what she didn't know was the man that hit her son head-on was drunk and driving in excess of 80 miles an hour.
When I walked into the emergency room and I told them who I was, and they immediately let me go back into the room where Tommy was, and I saw Tommy, I knew it was much worse than just a few broken bones. Tommy's father was holding on to the door facing with tears rolling down his face and saying he didn't know if Tommy would live or not. And I said, of course Tommy will live, Tommy's strong. And he told me it was a very bad accident. And as I'm looking into this room, I can see Tommy. And he has an oxygen mask on, and he is literally struggling to breathe. The sounds that you heard coming from his body. I could see his right foot that was on the gas pedal was turned upside down, was just dangling from his body. And with every heartbeat, the blood would thrust from that wound. The artery had been severed in that foot. The left thigh bone was broken and was about 8 inches long, but the size of a large watermelon. There was a little tiny gash on his face, and they told me that he had a broken clavicle and another broken artery in the clavicle, and that they were struggling to get a blood pressure from Tommy. About 6 hours later, the doctor came out and asked who Tommy's mother was, and he reached over and he held my hand, and he asked for all the family members to go into the special room. And as the doctor was sitting there holding my hand, he told me that Tommy was a fighter, that he wanted to live, that he didn't want to die, but that he had died, and he was no longer with us. And at that point I thought I was going to die too. That there wasn't much need to go on living. And then they took me to view his body there at the hospital. And they brought him out on a stretcher. And I can remember running my fingers through his hair, patting him on the face, holding him, kissing him. I knew that I could bring him back to life. The next day, we got up and we went to the funeral home. And I can remember standing at the entrance of the coffin room and looking at all the coffins. There must have been 20. Some very ornate, some very plain, some in different colors. The lining's different, some beiges, pinks, some with tucks, some with little puffs. And I started walking through the room, and I can remember at one point I cried out, "There's not one in here that would fit my teenage son. There's not one that I like." For Tommy's birthday, I can take him a rose or a single flower or change the flowers on his headstone. There's no more birthday parties. I miss Tommy. I miss his hugs and his kisses. Tommy was very affectionate. I miss picking up those Coke cans off the floor, the potato chip bags. I miss him asking for $5, $10. "Mom, take me here. Mom, I want." And that's all I have now are memories. 17 and a half years of memories. What a waste of 2 young lives. The drunk driver who died at the scene of the accident, and my son Tom.